Jacob Montgomery, a 38-year-old former military contractor, just trying to unwind after months of intense work. What should have been a peaceful stroll through his suburban neighborhood with his loyal German Shepherd Max quickly spirals out of control. When two overzealous police officers who think they can intimidate anyone decide to confront Jacob, they have no idea who they're messing with. This isn't just any man. They're about to learn the hard way that underestimating him could cost them everything. A quiet afternoon, the kind where the world feels still. Almost too still. Jacob Montgomery, a 38-year-old former military contractor, is walking his dog, Max, through the peaceful streets of his suburban neighborhood. The sun filters through the trees, casting long shadows, and everything feels perfect, until it isn't. Two police officers, Officer Collins and Officer Thompson, pull up beside him, eyes sharp and focused. They start asking questions, making assumptions about who Jacob is and where he belongs, questioning his every move with an unsettling authority. At first, Jacob stays calm, polite, controlled, a practiced response. But something about the way they push, the way they try to provoke him, sets off a warning bell deep inside him. He's been in dangerous situations before, dangerous men, dangerous places, but nothing like this. Here, in his own neighborhood, the very place he's fought to protect, these officers see him as an outsider. When they reach for their guns, aiming at Max, Jacob's calm facade cracks. In an instant, years of military training flood his mind, and he moves faster than they can react. His every action is calculated, deliberate. He's not just protecting himself, he's protecting Max, his loyal companion, the only family he's got left. The officers thought they could intimidate him, treat him like just another target. But Jacob isn't a man who folds under pressure. He's a force to be reckoned with. And as the situation escalates, one thing becomes clear. This won't end quietly. This is just the beginning. It was supposed to be a peaceful walk. The kind of walk you take when you just need to breathe, clear your mind, and reconnect with the world around you. But for Jacob Montgomery, that serene afternoon would become a moment of chaos that would change everything. At 38, Jacob was no stranger to danger. A former military contractor, he had been trained to handle life-or-death situations in the most hostile environments. He wasn't a man who could be intimidated easily, yet there he was, on his own street, just a few yards from his house, with his loyal German Shepherd Max by his side, confronted by two police officers, Officer Collins and Officer Thompson. What began as a routine traffic stop quickly spiraled into something much darker. The officers were rude, dismissive, and their questions carried an edge of suspicion. It started innocently enough, asking where Jacob lived, why he was walking his dog in a nice neighborhood like this. But when Jacob explained he was a former contractor and a consultant for high-risk security, they didn't believe him. They tried to provoke him, pushing his buttons, making him feel like an outsider. But Jacob stayed calm. After all, he knew how to keep his cool in high-pressure situations. However, when they insisted on searching his dog, Max, a well-trained guard dog, Jacob's patience wore thin. It wasn't just the unnecessary aggression, it was the blatant disrespect. He had been through too much, seen too much to let this slide. In an instant, everything changed. The officers reached for their weapons, one of them aiming directly at Max. And that's when Jacob snapped. This wasn't just about the officers anymore, it was about survival. Jacob moved faster than they expected, his military training taking over as he disarmed them with an intensity and precision that left the officers stunned. He wasn't just protecting himself, but the bond he had with Max, the one true companion he trusted with his life. This wasn't the last time Jacob would encounter them. No, this was only the beginning. The next steps would be carefully calculated. And when Jacob was finished, those two officers would realize just how wrong they were to pick a fight with someone like him. The stakes were about to get higher, and the officers had no idea what was coming. Justice, however, would be swift, and it would be personal. In the blink of an eye, Jacob Montgomery's life shifted from ordinary to extraordinary, but not in the way anyone would expect. It all started with Max, his loyal German shepherd, as they casually walked through their quiet suburban neighborhood. What should have been a peaceful day turned into a nightmare when two officers, Officer Collins and Officer Thompson, decided to assert their power. They approached Jacob with suspicion, accusing him of being out of place, questioning his every move as if he didn't belong in his own neighborhood. They wanted to push him, provoke him, see how far they could go without consequence. But Jacob wasn't just any man. They had no idea who they were dealing with. A former military contractor with a background in high-risk security, Jacob wasn't someone who could be intimidated easily. Still, he remained calm, hoping the situation would de-escalate. However, when the officers drew their weapons and pointed them at Max, the bond between Jacob and his dog was all that mattered. The world shifted. In a flash, Jacob's training kicked in. He wasn't just defending himself, he was protecting Max, his closest companion. That moment marked a turning point. Jacob didn't just stand up for his rights. He made sure these officers knew that their actions would have consequences. What began as an unnecessary confrontation escalated into a calculated fight for justice. Jacob wasn't just going to let this slide. He was about to turn the tables on them in ways they couldn't have imagined. The officers thought they could intimidate him, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. And this was only the beginning. Jacob Montgomery had a plan. The two officers, Officer Collins and Officer Thompson, had made a grave mistake, and Jacob wasn't about to let it slide. What started as a routine walk with his dog, Max, had turned into an all-out power struggle, and Jacob knew one thing for certain. This wouldn't be over until the officers paid for what they'd done. They had underestimated him, assumed he was just another man they could push around. But Jacob wasn't like the others. They didn't know the depth of his training, the extent of his patience, or the sheer resolve behind his calm exterior. In the days following the incident, Jacob laid his plans with military precision. He knew the officers would retaliate, desperate to regain control of a situation they had never expected to spiral out of their grasp. But Jacob had been here before. He had faced worse, seen the darkest sides of humanity, and survived. This fight wouldn't be one of fists. It would be one of strategy, where every move counted and every moment mattered. Jacob started by documenting their every action, collecting evidence of their misconduct, their corruption. He knew exactly where they went, who they interacted with, and how they operated. He wasn't just playing defense. He was setting the stage for a counterattack that would make sure these officers would never harm another innocent person again. When he released the footage of the abuse, he knew it would shake the foundation of the entire department. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. He had set the trap, and now the officers would have no choice but to face the consequences of their actions. Jacob wasn't just a man walking his dog anymore. He was a force to be reckoned with. And he had the world watching. The storm was coming, and it was going to be one they could never outrun. Jacob Montgomery's plan was working, but the weight of what he was about to unleash was heavier than he anticipated. After days of collecting evidence, tracking their every move, and carefully orchestrating the fallout, the time had come to reveal the truth. He had exposed Officer Collins and Officer Thompson, and their world was crashing down around them. The footage of their aggression, the broken trust, the illegal searches, and the blatant abuse of power were now public. Jacob had turned the tables, but as the news spread, so did the realization of just how deep the corruption went. Jacob had never planned on this being a simple revenge plot. It wasn't about satisfying his anger. It was about making sure the system was forced to reckon with the officer's actions. He was playing the long game. His release of the footage wasn't just a statement. It was a carefully crafted message to those in power that no one, no matter how protected they thought they were, could escape accountability. The storm had hit, and it was bigger than just two corrupt cops. It was about purging the rot that had been allowed to fester within the system. As the media coverage exploded and activists took to the streets demanding justice, Jacob knew the end game wasn't far off. Collins and Thompson, once untouchable, were now fighting a battle they couldn't win. Their careers, their reputations, their freedom, everything was slipping through their fingers, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. For Jacob, this wasn't the moment for triumph. It was the beginning of a much bigger war, one that he was prepared to fight until the end. Jacob knew the real battle was just beginning. With Officer Collins and Officer Thompson facing public humiliation, it was time to bring them to their knees. The officers might have thought they were done with him, but Jacob wasn't finished, not by a long shot. He had exposed their corruption, but it was more than just blowing the whistle. It was about dismantling their entire world. As they scrambled to salvage what little was left of their dignity, Jacob wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was the force pushing them toward accountability, and he had every intention of watching them fall. This was war. One of the key lessons from Jacob's story is the power of standing up for what is right, even when it feels daunting. His unwavering commitment to justice, despite the immense pressure and personal cost, reminds us that integrity and accountability matter more than anything. Sometimes the world may seem broken, and those in power might act without consequence. But it is our responsibility to ensure that justice prevails. It teaches us that while the fight for what is right can be long and difficult, perseverance and truth always have the power to change the system, even when the odds seem insurmountable.